Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Growthwell podcast, where we explore the art of balancing professional growth and personal well being. I'm your host, Josh Byrd, and I've got a fantastic guest for you today. I've got Matt Seefeld. He is an EVP at MedEvolve, but more than that, he's a founder, just like many of you, of a company called myLifeLink that we'll talk a little bit about. He's an investor, he's a dad. He was an All-American athlete at UC San Diego and just an all-around great guy. So welcome to the show, Matt.
Oh, great. Great to be on, Josh. I really appreciate it. Good intro too.
Thank you so much.
It's like coming out of a tunnel at a
Yeah.
football game.
That I always think of that when the Bulls came out in the 90s and they had that do
Yeah,
welcome Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, all the
that's right.
things. I try to
Yeah,
hype my guest up to be just like that. So
yeah,
if you can feel like Jordan, that's a good way to go into the podcast, right?
love
Everybody
it.
wants to be like Mike. Well, look, tell us a little bit about yourself. What are you up to personally, professionally? What are you into these days?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm grateful to be on this podcast because I love the concept of the work-life balance,
Yeah.
right? It's a colloquial term, everyone uses it, but how many people really understand what it means? And, I think that we're all busy, right? We all have lots of opportunities to be distracted, especially with
Mm,
technology. We have lots of opportunities to waste time on meaningless things with technology,
yeah.
right? And so when I talk to people about what they do outside of their corporate job, it's like, well, I don't really have a lot of time. It's like we do have time. There's 24 hours in a day, 7 days in a week. Take some of that time you're on social media and apply it to something for yourself or for others. So I think the most important thing that I've learned, especially in the last few years, is how service work
Yes.
has really become a huge component of my work-life balance. So while I can be stressed out today, I've got a big board meeting tonight with the company. I know that I will be coaching Little League at 5. We're playing the Yankees. Team's doing great this year. I'm on my team's the
All right.
Mariners. And so I throw myself into that. I throw myself into the service work, right? I also throw myself into health
Mm,
and fitness. That's another thing. You talk with people who are like, I have no energy. I'm kind of depressed. I don't really have any initiative. What's wrong with me? It's like, well, do you go crush workouts? Do you get your heart rate up for a long period of time? Do you set goals when it comes to fitness? And that's what I've really found is that people have to change their framework of what they're willing to be and what they want to be. And then once you've established what you want to be, how obsessed are you going to be at trying to achieve that goal?
yeah.
It's a key term because you got to be obsessed,
Yeah.
right? If you're just like, oh, I want to be a pro baseball player, or, oh, I want to lose weight, or oh, I want to learn a foreign language, and you're not doing everything possible to achieve that, knowing that you still may never achieve it,
Yeah.
right? You're losing out. So the last thing I'll say before we really get going is I work a lot better in my corporate job because of all the things I do outside of my
Yes.
work, right? And people have to understand it's like you got, fitness, you got more energy, being of service to others, you got, more self-esteem, you're more confident in your interactions with your peers and your employees at work. So I do feel like it actually drives a lot more efficiency at your corporate job by focusing on this. Those days of work 20 hours a day, you can't leave the office, stay in your blah, blah, blah. Those days are
Yeah.
over. Like society has shifted, especially post COVID, right? People have a whole different look. We're on a virtual meeting
Yeah.
right now, right? We live in a virtual world and it's only going to become more virtual. So we have to realize that virtuality can suck us in and we starts to take away from the quality of life, which in my opinion is the stuff you do outside of
Yeah,
work.
I totally agree. That's one of the reasons I started this podcast. And I find that the people that are, to use your term, able to be obsessed with something, they really connect it to a purpose, right? Or a big why. Like that video from Simon Sinek that everybody refers to, Start With Why, that TED Talk that kind of really catapulted his influence. So what's your purpose for getting up in the morning, for doing the work you do, and for being the man that you are?
Yeah, it's fun. It's really ironic you brought up Simon there because I've listened to that podcast many, many times, and I even tell like our sales team, if if you're starting with what we are and what we do, you're already
Yes,
lost. You've lost that battle. Why I do what I do, like in the healthcare world, right? I'm an executive at a healthcare software company. Why we do what we do is healthcare is completely broken. Physician groups are going out of business. Hospitals are closing their doors, and it's impacting community. So I know that the software that my teams are developing that starts to measure all of the waste that's going into a revenue cycle and starts to diagnose the why all this waste is there and then start to fix those problems will increase margin, which allows these folks to
that's
stay there.
right.
So it's really a community side. The service work that I do, why I do what I do, is one, I was an athlete all my life. It's brought a lot of pride to me, a lot of good memories to me. I want to be of service to this younger generation to do two things. One, I want to teach a sport, right? But I also want to create mentally strong
Yeah,
children that turn into mentally strong adults. And I think if you were to interview all of the coaches, all the teams that I've coached, especially in the last few years, as I really focus on this concept of emotional sobriety, which we'll talk about in a little bit, is the parents to say, wow, yes, he was a very good technician in teaching my son or my daughter how to do things. But the mental toughness and the callous mind that David Goggins talks
yeah,
about, and the fact that, the only person that can hurt you
that's
is
right.
you, is really what I try to get across. Because if you could just inspire a handful
Yeah,
of these younger folks to then want to inspire others, right? That's how growth goes. So that's the service work that I do, and that's why I do. I don't expect anything in return. But again, it also builds self-esteem
absolutely.
in me, which is what we need. I mean, I grew up with very low self-esteem. I was an identical twin. I was constantly fighting my identity. Andrew's better at me at this. I'm better than him at that. Does mom like me? Does dad like me? Right. So my whole life has been this kind of internal competition with an identical person,
Right.
and so how do I one disconnect from that and two start to realize that self-esteem issues can drive you to want to disconnect from feeling.
Yes.
And I got sober 7 years ago because I was using alcohol as a way to disconnect from feeling versus looking at the why do I feel this way.
Yes.
And most of the time, it's thoughts that aren't real. You got to remember, all your listeners there right now, the thoughts going through your head right now, they're not real. They're thoughts. Don't create a future that doesn't exist, and don't resent the past and live in the past. Right now, it's Matt and
That's
Josh.
right.
This is present moment stuff. So the more we as humans can stay present, which is what I teach these young kids when I coach, which is what I teach my employees at MedEvolve, what I bring to the community, the sober community at myLifeLink is as the closer we can stay to present moment, life is life. It's going to move in a longitudinal, it's going to move in a line whether you like it or not.
It really is. And, I've even had people say, life doesn't care about you, and that's freeing. That's actually a good thing, right? People aren't thinking about you and, how you look or, what your personality is near as much as you probably think about them thinking of you that way, right? And
Right.
so, encouraging people to just live their lives is so powerful, and especially intentionally creating that ripple effect that you're talking about, right? I have two kids as well, and working with them on their chosen activities and sports and teaching them the life lessons, and I see them teaching bits and pieces of that even to their friends, and so
Yep.
I think it's a commitment to making the world a better place. I love the quote, everything we do is a choice. You
Yep.
even letting life happen to you is a choice, right? So how are you going to choose better for yourself and for those around you? But it's hard to stay in that mindset, right? It's really hard for me, at least, especially if I don't have rituals and habits and routines that really help keep me growing both professionally and personally. So I'm really curious, with all of your experience in athletics and business, what rituals and habits, routines, non-negotiables do you have in your world that really help you stay closer to center?
Yeah. So discipline is the key term,
Right.
right? A lot of times people are motivated to do things, but if you don't have discipline, you'll never achieve what you want to achieve, right? So for me, my like on the corporate side, my team knows that I'm up
Mm.
early. I'm an early riser. I'm on the West Coast. If you want me at 5 a.m., I'm up at 5 a.m. But good luck getting me after 2.
Yeah.
Right. Right. And then here's why, because at 2 o'clock is when I go do my workout. I do it every day. Right. Unless there's something
Yeah.
crazy. Right. Today I got a board meeting, so I have to work out, early or later, but I got to get my workout in, ideally 60
Yeah.
minutes. And then I'm usually going to coach something.
Yeah.
That's how it is. So like springtime's busy. I got travel baseball, little league, and track. So I have to figure out how to balance that. But that's really important. And if you're working at a place that doesn't recognize your need for those things, it's probably not the right
Yeah.
place. Because I tell everybody that reports to me, and I own really a lot of the company. I've got implementation support. I've got all of our sales, go to market. I got marketing. I got all these folks, right? And so you need to make time for you,
Yeah.
right? I want you to. I'm giving you permission to make time for you, right? Build that into if you can. If the only time you can work out is 10 in the morning, then block out 10 to 11, do your workout, right? But at the end of the day, we've got to start setting time aside for health,
Yes.
and that could be meditating, that could be stretching, that could be an cardio workout, right? You love to cycle, we go do a ride,
Right.
right? It could be a lot of different things, right? It doesn't, as I said earlier, healthy people have healthier relationships in their work, drive better results, have less
Mm-hmm.
depression, right? I mean, you think about like all of that. We were talking about nutrition,
Right.
right? I also struggle,
It's
right? I mean,
hard.
I'm like, oh, I work out every day. I can eat burritos, and I love breakfast burritos. I love this and that, but I feel bad when I eat
That's
that
right.
stuff. So it's like an emotional response, and so fitness, exercise, uh, meditation, mindfulness work, so many opportunities. Cold water therapy. I started that back in December, like jumping into cold tubs. I was like, oh my god, this thing, it's terrible, but I was like, this is amazing. Like the results I've gotten from that sauna,
Yeah.
you know. And there's so much, and I live in a community where there's obviously a lot of wellness centers and this and that, but it doesn't really matter where you are. You have to make time to
That's
do
right.
these things. And that's it, but it comes to discipline, right? And it's like I talked to my wife about it. She was in the fall. She's like, I really want to get back in good shape. Well, you're in pretty good shape, and you got lucky. You got genetics
Yeah.
where you don't have to do much, and you still stay in really good
Right.
shape. I said, I don't have that. I have Seefeld. So it's like if I want to gain 30 pounds, I could do that really quickly. But if I want to lose 30 pounds, I could do it quickly
Yeah.
too. I said, so what do you want to do about it? She goes, well, I need to exercise. Well, she's full-time hardcore outside sales for iHeartMedia. She's a baller, and she doesn't have a lot of time. I said, okay, well, what about morning? Well, school's busy in the
Yeah.
morning. I said, what about earlier in the morning? Well, I go at the gym at 6. Oh my God, that's so early.
Mm.
What time do you go to bed on average? Oh, like 11, 11:30. Well, why are you going to bed? So like, well, I'm watching my shows. Watch less shows, go to bed at 10, wake up at 6,
Yeah.
right? And I'm
And
saying it in a much more nicer way, but it's like, it's this way. So she's doing it. So all year now, she's been going 3 times a week with a friend, meeting at 6. And I'm just like, look at you. You're transforming
yeah.
yourself and you're happy about it. You're like, you're proud about it.
Yeah, I think that's so important to, man, you touched on a couple of things, but to carve out that time for yourself. And the thing that I challenge everybody that's listening is you think the world's going to fall apart if you take an hour for yourself. And the truth is, it's just not. And I get caught up in this too, right? Matt, you're laughing because you know what I'm talking about.
I know what you're
Emails are
saying,
blowing
man.
up when you're going to the gym, and you have to, consciously make that decision that like that person can wait till 3 or 3:30, and so the world's not going to end if you take care of yourself.
Yeah,
In fact, it'll be a much worse place if you don't take care of yourself. But the
yeah,
the culture of now and immediacy, I think, gets us all wrapped up, and where we don't feel like we can take that time for ourselves. And so I loved hearing you talk about that. The other thing that you talked about, and I think it's in your work with myLifeLink, which I really want to hear about, and also what you said about your wife. She meets a friend every
mhm,
3 times a week. there's accountability there, right? And so I'm curious for you and for these communities that you're a part of, how do you put things, people, communities around yourself to help you both stay in balance, and then if you get off balance, because life is life, right? They can kind of help pull you back. I know that I'm usually the last one to realize I'm out of balance. My family will tell
Yeah.
me before I know it. So what are your thoughts on that accountabilities and communities around, and what do you do to build that around you?
Yeah, well, I'll use myLifeLink as kind of a reference point, right? So in 2017, I realized that I had to make a significant change in my life. I needed to quit drinking, quit using that as a crutch. It had basically destroyed about 3.5 years of my family. My wife and I had been separated, in 2015, 16, 17, and nothing was going well for me, right? And I went to a treatment facility, a pretty well known treatment facility out here in the West. And when I checked out after my 30 days, I felt amazing. I was ready to take on the world. This lady handed me a business card and said, "Hey, call this guy. He came through the program and he lives in San Diego." And I said, is he sober?" And she's like, "I don't know." I said, "Well, what does he do for a living?" He's a surfer. I mean, I'm a surfer. Was he a college athlete? Is he an executive? Has he been separated before? Does he have kids? She's like, "Man, that would be amazing to have that information." And said, "This is crazy." So as an entrepreneur who left Deloitte in '07 and a partner track job to start my first software company, like I was like, this is an
Right.
opportunity here. Why can I go onto a match.com or a cars.com and put in attributes and you're connecting me with things that I want to be connected with? Where's the I need to get help,
Yeah.
piece? And so this really starts to your point around community, or what I call tribes,
Hmm.
is people need to have communities and tribes with people they can relate to. Right? And this isn't a way to say, well, I'm not going to relate to you versus you. I know there's so much
Sure.
stuff out there in the market about inclusion. What I'm saying, though, from a recovery standpoint, is while I can relate to an alcoholic, I can't relate to an alcoholic who's been to war, who's killed people, who has PTSD, who's been incarcerated, who's
Right.
homeless. But there are people out there who have that profile, have gotten healthy, who have built extraordinary lives that can. And that's the whole intent of myLifeLink, is to bring people together on a much deeper level than just their addiction,
Right.
right? And then once that happens, then you start to see healing, right? Then there's no more like, "You don't understand my situation." Oh yeah, I do. I've
Yeah.
been there. I've literally been exactly where you are,
That's right.
right? And I have these conversations every day. So the app is awesome. It's a free app. If you want, you can pop it in the show notes.
Yeah, I
But it's
definitely
My
will.
Life Link. You can download it on the Apple or Google Play. It's free. It's not a commercial
Sure.
live solution. I'm never going to charge for it. We've got tens of thousands of people all over the world that have downloaded and use it. So, but the whole intent goes back to one of your question, is it's community. So my natural state, believe it or not, I know I seem extroverted, but I'm not. I'm actually an introvert, right? My natural state of comfort is alone. So like when I was drinking, I wasn't out partying.
Yeah.
I didn't really have a lot of consequences, thank God, because of that, right? But I drank alone.
Yeah.
And it was always this woe is me. It was a lot of victim,
Hmm.
how is this happening to me, right? And so isolation is a terrible,
Yes.
terrible thing for us as humans. Now, disconnecting for a while to make time for yourself, absolutely imperative. But we have to socialize. We have to do that. And especially when you start thinking about the goals you want to achieve. Look, if you want to get in really good shape, honey, so I said to Laura, I said, find a friend who
Yeah.
loves doing this stuff. Of course, she comes back to me and she's like, "Well, you don't need that." I said, "You're right. I can crush myself. That's just something I can do on my own. Like I just
Right.
do it." But I go to the health club because my friends are
That's
there.
right.
So I can go crush a 60-minute workout, but I've said hi to at least 7 or 8
Yeah.
guys. Maybe I stop the workout for a split second to just talk about our kids. So for me, though, it's not in the garage,
Right.
right? It's not alone. It's out there around a group of people. And I think that's where healing begins in all sorts. When you have accountability from somebody else, right? So like on myLifeLink, I check in every morning on the app. Here's what my intentions are. It's really easy. It's structured data. It's easy to do. And then throughout the day, I track the things that I'm
Right.
doing, right? Being of service to others, right? I track that. Exercise, track that. Sharing my story, I gotta track that as soon as we get off this podcast. What that does is it reinforces to me what I'm doing to stay
Yes.
healthy. It's also reinforcing to the community that, hey, if you're not doing these things, you might want to
Right.
consider it. So it's really about that. And in recovery, you touched on something earlier that I just want to bring up because I love that you went down this route of technology. Like, this is the best and the worst invention ever.
Absolutely.
Okay. And I
Mine's
think
right
that there
here.
are things that, right, there are things that have created, right. I can book an airline ticket. I can chat with this, hotels. I can Venmo people, all those things. So there's definitely utility here. But the thing that I can't stand is the text messaging, which is basically turned into if you're not immediately there to answer my question. Like, I watch my wife do this. I know I'm calling out Laura, so if you're listening, I'm sorry. But
Do so at
she's
your
got
own
seven
risk.
or eight. I know, but I talked to her about it. I said, you have like 7 or 8 group chats going on at any given time, and she's constantly doing things. I see this at the gym. I'll go work out here in a little bit. And it's not just the young
Yeah,
kids, right? It's everybody. They're connected to their phone between sets. Like, they can't disconnect. And that is very concerning. Look at our kids.
sure.
You've got kids, I've got kids, right? We got young kids. Take that iPad away. It's like taking heroin away from a heroin addict, right? They'll go into a fit of rage. I mean, my 9-year-old, who's an awesome kid, he's a great athlete, he's absolutely addicted to
Oh,
YouTube.
yeah.
And it's like first thing in the morning, man, he turns it on, and I have to listen to 3 minutes of BS,
Yeah,
by people doing silly things. And I worry about what that's doing to the brain, and what's that, because that's that dopamine
yeah,
hit, right? It's like I drank to disconnect,
correct.
right? Somebody takes drugs, somebody is addicted to exercise or sex or porn, whatever it is, right? It's that dopamine hit
Yeah,
you want. This is the same
it
thing.
really is.
It's the
My
same thing.
kids, they'll come home and I do know that they're tired, but they're like, "Can I have some screen time?" And we do allow it for a little while, but, like, I think that there is a scary side to it too because I notice sometimes my kids are like, "Well, what should I do?" And I'm like, we have a dog, we have a yard,
Yeah.
you have bikes,
Yeah.
you have trees you can climb,
Yep.
you have a play fort, use your imagination. And
Yeah.
I fear that they may be losing the ability to do that. Now my kids, thankfully, they can do it once I sort of prompt them and they're like, "Oh yeah, that's fun. I could
Mhm.
go do that." But like, just using that kind of creativity to uh, engage with yourself, right? And not have to just check out and get that dopamine hit. So,
Yeah. Well, I think we've lost it. I mean, you and I are close in age, and we grew up in a generation where it was
yeah,
outside, right? You got home from school, maybe you had football or baseball practice. You come home, and mom's like, dinner won't be ready till 7, and so we'd go out and go throw the
that's right.
football. We'd hike the mountains. We'd come back at dark, and I feel like that we'd missed that. I was talking with a friend of mine yesterday about the way sports has changed, right? So my older son's a water polo player, and it's all year round. And if you don't stay on it all year round, then you're gonna run the risk of not being on the
Yeah,
team. Like, it's that
it
crazy
really
addiction.
is.
You go, my younger son he's a baseball player, football player, basketball, the traditional sports. And, oh, well, if you don't do all year round travel ball, he's going to be behind the eight ball. So I'm talking to this guy, and I said, that was never like it. When I was growing up, it was you played the sport in the season, you moved on to the next
That's
season, man.
right.
Like, there wasn't any of this. I mean, I ended up being an All American college, and it wasn't because I was doing all year round everything, one thing all year round. And I see that now in this generation, which is also concerning because we're not able to teach these kids things that they need to be able to do outside of
That's right.
sports. Like, I haven't taught my kid to fly fish. We have never gone backpacking. We don't rock climb. I haven't even really taught the kids to surf. I said, "Dad, these are not organized sports. These are things that we
Yeah,
could do forever.
recreation.
Skiing,
Yeah,
skiing. Like, we ski, like, or we do our 1 or 2 trips a year." I'm like, my younger one is obsessed with it. So I bought us icon passes. I'm like, we're going to hit 15 days next year somehow.
yeah,
We're going to do it. He's like, yeah, Dad, that's great. I think that when you look at the technology addiction and you look at this prevalence of having to do all year round stuff, that is such a red flag to
yeah.
me
It's
because we are not that busy. And you said something at the beginning of this podcast around we think we're just too important to turn off our
Yeah,
devices.
we
Guess what, folks? Life will literally
it
go
will.
on without you, no matter how critical we believe we are. And I had this. I'm like, oh my God, if I were to leave this MedEvolve company, I mean, the whole thing would fall apart.
No, it
No, it
won't.
wouldn't.
No
It
offense.
might struggle for a little
Yeah,
bit, but it's not going to
yeah.
fall apart, right? It's so that then the thing is like, why are we like on vacations? Why are we so connected?
Oh, yes,
You
yes.
know, I mean, the last two trips we just did a trip to Mexico. I literally turned my phone off. I mean, the only thing I would do at night is just a quick perusal of five
Yeah,
minutes just to make sure there wasn't anything like
nothing's on fire,
but
but
as a
yes.
senior exec, you kind of have to keep eyes on that. But outside of that, don't call me, don't
Yeah,
text me. And I actually tell my teams that
I
too,
do
by the
too.
way. Like I tell them, I said, when you're on vacation, I don't want to hear from
Yeah,
you. Don't check in. And I said, when I'm on vacation, I don't want to hear from you unless it's something urgent. Right? If it's like a
sure.
whole team type thing, like that. We have to find more time and more balance. And I love that the podcast is about work-life balance because a lot of the work we do is not critical work. I look at my travel. I used to fly every week when I was at PwC and Deloitte and with Interpoint. I'm traveling all over the country with working with health systems every week for probably 20 years, millions of miles domestically
Yeah,
flown. I don't know how many hotel nights. I bet you 50% of that was not
yeah.
necessary. And I think like what that did to my life,
You
right? I
missed on
fell into
something.
alcoholism. I missed on a
Yeah,
ton. And here we are. I wake up, I'm 47, and I'm like, holy
yeah,
crap. I got a kid that's about to be in high
yeah.
school.
It's
Yeah,
wild.
I
It
mean, it's
goes
like,
so
where did that
fast.
time go?
It goes
Yeah,
so fast. Well, when you are traveling, when you are busy at work, and if you get off of your routine and you get off your balance, you seem pretty disciplined, but you're still human. So, if you get off balance, or for somebody like your wife that's off balance, what's your go-to to like snap yourself back to a
yeah,
more balanced position? And I like to talk about this concept that balance is really achieved by two opposing forces, and it's not stillness; it's actually hard work. My trainer has me sit on a Bosu
yeah,
ball sometimes with no arms, no
yeah,
legs, and try to balance, and you fall off if you're not really working your muscles
yeah.
against each other. And so, what actions do you take to get back in balance?
Yeah, it's funny because you use fitness is that's the first thing that I do when I'm in that mood. And I've been in it recently, right? We've had a lot of changes in our corporate structure. I've had to take on a way more responsibility than I had, say six
Right.
months ago. I'm sitting at the desk a lot more. It's been a pretty high stress situation. The old guy would drink, I just use that and I'd be fine. But the new guy's like, oh, I can't do that. I said, I got to work through it. I count a
Yeah.
workout. And even if it's 15 minutes, like the other day, I had to go coach a baseball game. I had a little league board meeting. I knew I couldn't even get to the gym. So we have a Peloton rower in the garage. I got some dumbbells. I'm like, what can I do in 15 minutes?
A
Get my heart
lot.
rate up, keep it up there, literally. And that's just a
Yeah.
reset. The other thing, which is going to be interesting for you to relate to, is socializing.
Yeah.
When I my natural state is to hold those things inside and not tell you about it. That's what I was when I was a kid. I created a lot of anxiety. I had a lot of like nervous tics, and I was just bottled
Yeah.
up. And now, even though that's my comfort zone, as David Goggins likes to say, you have to do what makes you uncomfortable if you want
Yes.
growth. I talk about it. I get it out in the open, knowing that me talking about it is for me, right? How
Absolutely.
somebody interprets what I'm talking about, that's on them,
Yeah.
right? Like, I mean, that's just I'm just saying what is. How you choose to react to that or take it is on you. So anytime I'm in that headspace, and I've been in a lot recently, I throw myself into physical activity and
Yeah.
socialization. Because the old guy would not have been physical. He would have drank some vodka and he would have
Yeah.
isolated. So it's like literally the opposite of
It
that,
really is,
right?
and it's interesting. I'm an introvert too, and I've been at a conference the past couple of days, and just forcing myself to say, "Hey, how are you? Where are you from?" And see where the conversation goes. And then also, setting up very purposeful and intentional times of sharing, like this podcast, right? That I've found so much life through, just for myself, and others are finding that too, just through our conversation. So, you know, is there any other advice? We've covered it a lot, but is there any other advice that you would give someone who's feeling out of balance? um, and trying to get themselves on track.
Yeah, I used this with my Little League team on Monday. We played a game, and I talked about the concept of let it flow and let it go.
Mm,
I read a book years ago called The Way of the Peaceful Warrior. I think it's Dan Milligan, and it's amazing book. And one of the principles that he talks about, and he does it through a character, and it's supposed to be him, UC Berkeley in the 60s, is there's a scene in the book where he's downtown and a house, basically, not a house, but it was like a restaurant or it was a place of work, went up in flames. The owner is outside and he just starts screaming and crying and falls to the ground for about a minute. And Dan's like, "Oh my God, what's going on?" And he stops, he stands up and he's like, "Hey, how's it going?" And Dan's like, "Well, you just lost like
yeah,
everything." He's like, "Yeah, I know." "Well, how are you okay now? I mean, you were so distraught a minute ago." So he goes, "Well, I can't do anything about that
yeah,
now. That's what already happened." But I allowed my time a minute to let the emotion out,
yes,
and then I moved on. And this is what I talk about with my Little League team. I said, "You strike out. If you want to have a moment of hysteria, that's okay. Don't show it, right? If you
yeah,
want an internal, but then you got to let it
yeah,
go. You got to play the next play, right?" And it's this principle of let it flow and then let it go. I think the other big thing I'll recap is that the more we can have present moment, the
yes,
happier our lives become because it takes the pressure off of the timeline. You said like linear, right? Like somebody once told me, there's no good and bad in life. It's just life. Now we may interpret certain
sure,
things that happen to us as good and some as bad, but at the end of the day, it's life. When I got in recovery, whether you believe in God or higher power or not, like I do
I
believe
do
in a higher
too.
power. And when I
Yes,
finally recognized that I have now don't have the self will, I can't self will myself out of
right,
this, right? Is that I have to put faith that the timeline, right? And my wife and I talk about this a lot because we were separated for almost 4 years, and a lot of bad things happened prior to that. And she's now come to the point of acceptance that had those things not happened in the sequence that God intended those to happen, you and I are not
that's
having
right,
this discussion
that's
right now.
right. You
I mean,
might
it's
be
just
off the
not like
deep
we're
end
here
somewhere.
because of
Who
that.
knows?
But it's us because of that path. And so the more that we recognize that things are going to happen, and please, don't create a future that doesn't exist. Stop looking at your thoughts and your rat. The rat brain is real. They're not real. They're just
Yeah,
thoughts. And forget about what just happened. Right? Goes up in flames. Let it float. Let it go. And I think those are the biggest things. I think one other area I always like to talk about is actions and
mm,
outcomes. Everyone thinks they control outcomes, and you don't. We don't control outcomes in life. We never have. We never will. But we do control action. So I tell, especially in sports, you want to be an Olympian, you want to be a pro baseball player, you want to do a D1, whatever. How obsessed are you willing to be at trying to achieve that, knowing that you still may not achieve it? It's like chasing the horizon
yes,
line. You can run as fast as you can,
never
but you'll
find
never
it.
catch it. But imagine the journey you're going to be on and how much strength you're going to build in yourself and learn about yourself by doing
Yes.
that. Even if you don't, even if you come up
Well, it's
short.
all for
So
a
that's,
purpose, and if you come up short, the lessons that you learn along the way, the personal character that you've built, the people that you've influenced along the way, it's all working together for a reason, or I believe that anyway. And, I think that is validation to just do the work, right? Do the work and put your whole self in it, and keep your priorities in line, right? That's what the podcast is about, because um we all have to work, but how do we make sure that it is not our number one priority and we're prioritizing other things like family and faith? So, last question: what's next for you? What's on the horizon for you? You mentioned horizon, ironically, but what's next on the
yeah.
horizon for your growth journey? And what are you continually striving for?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the personal health goals is a big thing for me. I think we were joking a little bit about kind of chronic
Yeah,
pain and injuries that
getting
continue to
old.
see exacerbate themselves as we
Yeah,
get old. So I think that's always going to be a part of my journey is staying moving, and coaching is a big thing for me. I think on the corporate side, I do see an endpoint to what I've done for my whole career in the revenue
sure.
cycle, right? That's not going to be ongoing legacy, and I want to invest a lot more time into myLifeLink.
Yeah.
I really, really want to actually start to build that as a business, likely a not-for-profit, where I can really start helping a lot more people access the services that they need to get back to building a transformational, extraordinary
Yeah.
life. And that's the big thing, right? Is that we have a society of people who are in need, and not everybody has resources. Either it's they can't afford it, they don't know about it. It's only getting bigger. Like mental health, right? It's only becoming larger
Right.
challenges. Suicide is continuing to go up, right? It's now you got kids that are addicted to this and that. They didn't like my video. They posted something about me here that creates an internal strife, which creates depression. So I want to throw myself
Yeah.
into that, and I want to do it for a couple of reasons. One, my identical twin brother, he's a ER physician, addiction medicine. He's done amazing work. He's actually somebody you should talk to on your
We would love to have
podcast.
him.
He's done literally amazing work with some concept of thought addiction, emotional sobriety, and the science of addiction. And he's a clinician, but he puts in a very easily digestible framework, and it's amazing. And he and I have this plan to kind of come back together, not just as brothers. This is about two people in
Right.
recovery. He's in recovery as well. Is to really start helping this myLifeLink community and provide resources to it. I want that to be a
Yeah.
legacy. I think people ask about what their legacy is, and I've learned that you go on, you live past death in other people,
Absolutely.
which is why I throw myself into coaching sports. I'm throwing myself into myLifeLink. Those are really the things. I don't know if anyone's going to necessarily remember me for revenue cycle management, for software development, right?
Right.
My hope there is always I want to keep people in business who want to stay in business. But I want people to remember that, hey, this guy threw himself into service work, which inspired me to throw myself into
Yes.
service work.
Yes.
And addiction has been the big focus for me because it just destroys lives. It destroys, you can think right now, you don't have to name it, but I bet you got at least 3 or 4 people that pop in your mind that have some form of a physical or behavioral addiction
Absolutely.
that are starting to isolate and feel alone. It's just a reality of the game, right? And when we start to look at emotional addiction, then it opens it up to
Right.
everybody, right? I'm addicted to not being good enough. I'm addicted to anxiety. I'm addicted to worthlessness,
Yeah.
feeling there's self-worth. Whole different ballgame there. And so that's what I want to do. I want to put my energy back into that. I love doing these podcasts. I super appreciate
Yeah.
you because like these are the conversations I want to have. I was just on
Absolutely.
with another guy, my buddy Saul, on his podcast, and it was kind of similar conversation. And sometimes I'm on these casts, and it's like, tell me about MedEvolve and tell me about healthcare,
Right.
blah blah blah. And I'm like, I could tell you about it, but I'd like to talk about helping
Yeah.
people.
Yeah. Well,
So,
thank you so much for being
so
on the show. For all you listeners, he mentioned several things, myLifeLink, and a couple other things that we'll link in the show notes to make sure that you have access to them. That's what we're all about here. Thank you so much for listening. As always, thanks to my generous sponsors at Market Scale. And until next time, I hope that you go out into your life and pursue growth well. See you soon.